If you're an occupational therapist who feels like you should have it all figured out by now, but don't, you're not alone. Welcome to the OT Coaching Confidential. This podcast is a little different to most. Each episode is a real mentoring conversation with an occupational therapist somewhere in Australia navigating their own professional growth. I'm Alyce, a paediatric OT and founder of the OT Coach Australia, and this week I'm joined by Sophia, an experienced occupational therapist who's in the early stages of building her own private practice after more than a decade of working across government, hospitals, schools, and child development teams. In this conversation, we explore what it looks like to step into the private practice space while holding on to past experiences of system reform, the emotional weight that uncertainty can bring, and how our professional identity evolves over time. We also talk about neurodiversity affirming practice, working intentionally with families, and how to build a service that aligns with your values rather than rushing to grow. Now let's get started. Welcome, Sophia. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks. It's great to be here.
So let's get started with a bit about you. Tell us about how you've become the OT that you are today.
It's been a bit of a journey, lots of kind of growth moments and aha moments for me over the course. So I've been out for 11 years now, mainly working in government for the majority of what I've done. And in my head thinking, government job, we should definitely do that. But over time, I sort of figured out that it did take the joy and the creativity out of my role a little bit. So I had the babies, did maternity leave, took the jump and started doing some contracting work, and now have my own practice. It's just up and running. So I'm excited to talk to you and get some of your insights.
Are you pediatrics, or are you a bit of everything? From the looks of it, you've done lots of different clinical scope areas.
Yeah, great question. So yeah, I've sort of worked mainly in the pediatric space. So prior to the NDIS, I was in the government service that held that disability community funding. And then when the NDIS was in its inception, we lost the funding. So we all had to find new jobs. And that was really scary. I was in the community disability service, mainly working with school-age children with autism, physical disabilities like cerebral palsy, dystrophy, working alongside their family, covering both school and home, which was really nice. After that, I took the job that I fell into and I moved to the hospital. I worked there for about 18 months to get some more experience, to see what I liked, but also just in a bit of a waiting pattern to see what happened, because we were hopefully all going to jump ship to education and working in schools. And so that eventually happened. Yeah. So in the hospital, I did stroke, which I loved, with older people, and just some of the generic wards as well.
Sounds like this sort of replicates where we are right now. You've already gone through one big reform and now you're sitting at the other side of another reform.
Yes. And I just briefly, before we kind of started recording, I was just saying you've caught me at an interesting time, because I feel like some of that stress within my body at the big concept of unknown change come back, even though I'm a very different person now.
But it's like that trauma experience, right? Like it was incredibly traumatic, not knowing what you were doing. And I think a lot of people don't know this has happened before, and that there was a really big upheaval when those services were defunded and people did have to rescope, retrain, try and get different roles. And so I think it's really fair that you've got those little flutters of worry coming up because you have experienced it. But we don't know exactly what this is looking like just yet. So it's not exactly the same. And you are currently working for yourself. So you do have that opportunity to pivot and scope and rechange and think about where you want to go, which is what I guess we were hoping to chat through a little bit today. Tell us a bit about your practice. How long have you been working for yourself?
So technically 2 years, but it has been in inception for a couple of years before that. But I guess it just never felt like the right time. So I'm big on letting go of control to some degree and just seeing what unfolds and what's coming more easily. And at the time when I first started setting up documents and seeking clients and referrals, there was just some things that weren't feeling like they were flowing. So I just put the pause on that and the brakes on it, and came and just kept doing what I was doing. Because the other thing with me and a lot of health professionals, a lot of women, is that you keep trying to go for what's the next thing, but there is so much value in just staying.
And just being in. And I think when you've had sort of 10 years in practice, you've experienced that. So for such a young workforce, sometimes we haven't had that opportunity because it has been jump, go. And we haven't had that same experience of just being competent and able to just do the work that we've spent the years training for without having to keep on going. It doesn't mean we don't have professional goals or growth or anything like that, but it's not chasing that next dangly carrot. It's let's just live this beautiful life. And what does that look like when I can just do the things I want to do without having to worry? First, like you said, this is something I hadn't really put that female lens over it, but it's definitely something that I find, particularly with this mid-career sort of space, where some people hit that point of mastery and go, I'm bored. I hate this. I'm not good at this. I don't like this, because they've jumped over and forgotten that they're actually mastered it. And it's easy. Like it's meant to be easy for you now. What you're remembering was the stress that came with it being hard. And so it feels, instead of like leaning in and going, oh, I've made it, this is good, it's like, oh, something must be wrong, I have to fix this.
Absolutely. And I think that's really hard to kind of accept and acknowledge in yourself as well. And that's come with time. And what's helped me a lot is my yoga practice through that as well. And then that's sort of like just taught me to just be present in the time and space and just be grateful and acknowledge that. And, as a young therapist, you don't have to jump ship all the time to keep getting skills. You actually get so many skills from, even if it's a less ideal job, from the job that you're in. And they're so transferable.
I was literally thinking this, exactly what you're talking about yesterday. It was back at Pilates and I was watching my instructor and I was like, oh, that would be nice to just get to hang out, have a chat, run your session, say goodbye, and then like have time and not just be on that, what's next? Who else? What have I got to do? Boom, 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 boom. Like it's hard. So you're in like a bit of an interesting space with those two different worlds colliding, I guess.
Yeah. And I think it was like the universe at the bigger side kind of telling me at the time that I was thinking about it, I hadn't been as present in that moment. So I'm glad that I waited. And I think another thing is like OT isn't my life. But it was more my life when you study it, you're immersed in it. Then you cut out and you're like, oh my gosh, my job, my identity, and then slowly over time as, you mature, but also you have your family and hopefully get back to some interest. So I guess like that would be advice for the young version of me, because I listened to some other podcasts of yours and you often ask that question, is that OT is not who I am. It's part of that.
Oh, this is so interesting. Literally getting goosebumps listening to this. So when I had to shut down the practice, that was really hard because so much of my identity was linked to being a business owner and the practice owner and having this big practice and the team and all of those things. So I had to do work to unpack that, to go, who am I without that? And that's what's really difficult. Now I just acknowledge that I'm just in and have like a million different projects, and that is where I sit. But it was really tricky when you take that one thing off to go, oh, like what is this? If that's gone, who am I and what does that look like? And I think for you, having found yoga as that interest point or another, and something that's so grounding and beautiful, right? Like something that genuinely pulls you into that space and really makes you think about it, is so lovely. It would be difficult because I've tried to have these conversations with people before. Unless you're ready to hear it, you can't hear it. It's not like probably going back and telling yourself that probably wouldn't have done anything. Same for me. Like, don't put your whole heart into this because you need to protect yourself somewhat. If you're a wholehearted everyone in, until you get to that point where you learn, and maybe going through motherhood helps with that too, when you've got separate roles and I've been reflecting on this heavily too this week of I have all these things I want to do, and then you're home. Oh, I'm meant to be mum. Hang on. Let me step back into that role. So I was the same as a new grad, found it. Everything was work. Everything was about being a great OT. I was, it was back before Facebook was really a massive thing, but I was on the Facebook groups every night. I was searching things all of the time. My identity was 100% OT.
But it's still like exciting. Like I still get excited by my work. And I think I made some really intentional. So I was working in the school setting for quite a while, like 7 years. But then I made some really intentional choices to get me to the goal of going out on my own. So I was lucky enough to work child and adolescent mental health, basically. Like an early intervention sort of team for that. And then I also then went to like a child development service within the government as well. So those were kind of shorter jobs. But for me, because I'd already had that other clinical experience, it was more for me kind of sussing out different areas of practice and how different practices are run and getting to know the lay of the land. So in the child development job, I got a bit more understanding of the NDIS, because we supported families to move on to that. So that was more intentional in my choices. Obviously, probably not great for the workplace, but they can cope. I just gave myself those couple of years time to I didn't need to know everything, but I felt like I wasn't quite ready to kind of not have that supportive environment around me.
I love this. This is beautiful though, because we hear a lot of people jumping in because it's not always the easiest option. It might be an option that fell into their lap, or it might be what is perceived to be that next step because they don't know any different. Where because you've come from that other side, you go, oh, it's actually a lot to know. My goodness, there's so many moving parts. And we find this a lot in the pediatric space, especially. Like we were talking about this in the pediatric hub the other day. People don't know about the free resource. They don't know about the government funded services. They don't know about the things that live in mainstream supports because they've never worked in a space outside of the NDIS world. Where I had done similar to you, I guess, where I'd come in from a government placement. So was aware of all of those things. Then went into the private sector and was like, well, we can't access any of those government funded things, but I want to know how people can because I want people to know what the options are. But I'm realizing more and more that not everyone thinks the same way as me. So if you're listening, make sure you know what the services are that are out and about and around, just like Sophia did, so that when you do come out, you can place yourself effectively and know what your boundaries are, who else is out there to refer across to. Because otherwise, it's really hard to build those boundaries for yourself.
And I think I've heard this earlier on in the piece when I was sort of going in that real hyper-focus mode. So I am neurodiverse, late diagnosed ADHD after I had my first child. Life-changing for the better. Wish I knew earlier. Really good to work. So it just changes kind of the way I approach things and understand myself a little bit more. Knowing my boundaries, and I'd heard it a lot before. That's right, thank you. I'd heard it a lot before in the sense of just have your niche sort of thing and know your scope and stuff. Because coming from a government service, you just take what you're given. And also when you're starting out a private practice, you're sort of like, I'll just take anything. So not that I've done, I'm kind of doing a little bit of everything. It's hard to know where to put time and money and energy, but it sort of had flowed well that I had that in my mind. And then I'd started a social media page and something must be happening right because I am getting referrals that either just word of mouth, obviously, but yeah, some from social media, and they tend to be the clients that I am looking for. So that was just an interesting observation. This is where that thing is. So there are some clients who I'm on the fence about and taking back that, choice and control for me. So I guess that's hard to say no.
Absolutely. So let's talk a bit about the practice where you're at the moment. So you are in quite a busy, lots of therapists area. Are you getting a lot of referrals? Because I find others that are setting up in this space, it can be tricky to crack the market. So you're getting consistency in referrals.
That's part of the reason I did decide to rent a room in this community space was to have that more networking and consistency. I was lucky enough when I contracted, I was very honest with the person I contracted for to say, this is my plan. I'm going to go out on my own. And we gave the clients the option and they chose to come with me. Obviously, I developed that rapport with their child. I guess another thing just fell into my lap through the socials. I got contacted by somebody who had a room to rent with a space of other health professionals. So I thought, even though I love mobile therapy, and this was when Thriving Kids was nobody knew much about it. And I thought with kind of the changes that might be coming, it might be good to have a space. Because I imagine one thing that will go to save money is travel.
Absolutely. So are you with kids, caseloads, kids at the moment, a bit of the kids and mental health caseload? What does that look like?
Yeah, so I work with children probably from 4 to anywhere between 4 and 18, mainly looking at, and I know that this is it feels like a area that is exactly being targeted by Thriving Kids because a lot of my clients are ADHD or have autistic.
And primarily NDIS funded?
Yeah, primarily. I do see some Medicare ones, but obviously they're short term. And at the moment, I'm not mental health registered. Yeah. I went and looked at that form and I thought,
oh my gosh, this is a lot.
Whilst I am, and again, it's one of those things, don't try and do everything at once. Focus on staying still a little bit, getting your confidence, getting your footing, and then it will become easier to hit that next goal.
When you looked at the mental health registration, would you meet criteria from the information that you saw? Not cleanly, not easily.
Completely. No, I would definitely need to just do some more webinars and things like that. And I've got a supervisor who their role was to help me with this process. So I would get coaching from them. So yeah, I just need to do a little bit more training. And it just, to me, sounded like they were just trying to make OT psychologists.
It is something that's been around for a long time, that pathway. So it's actually something that OTs push for to get that registration from that space.
Talk to them about that, but just the questions and some of it vary from that.
It is very absolutely because it is mental health treatment.
Yeah.
So it is a really interesting space. And I was just chatting with somebody about this week. It's difficult because it is a good one, particularly for the type of work you want to do, to lean into and have a look at. But they're wanting mental health OTs, the ones who've worked in the private sector, not the ones that have been doing the NDIS work, because that's not treatment, that's capacity building. So it's quite a different scope of service. We did have a look, just for interest, we did have a look through the OTA mental health training that's on the OTA website. That looks it's very comprehensive, but would give all of that framework. And then the application is a lot. But it comes back to you thinking about who you want to be servicing moving forward. So this probably is really a feasible pathway for you to go down that will allow you to continue to service those clients, putting that pretty strongly on the radar to have a think, could I meet this? What would that look like? How many days are you working in the business?
4, but 4 short days.
So like school hours-ish?
So I don't get anywhere before 9:30, and then have to finish at 2:30. Whereas before I was sort of having those longer days, but less. And so I guess it's just readjusting to that. And like you said before, clicking that brain over. It's really hard to sort of click over to mum. Or just like stop thinking about work. And I don't know why that is, whether it's because it's exciting, whether I really love it, or whether I just like to tick things off my to-do list.
How many clients are you doing in that sort of shorter days?
A busy day will be 4, and a less busy day will be 3. So I've got 3 days where I am pretty consistently booked, and then another one where I fit in the Medicare enhanced primary care scheme, or just a one-off, parent session or MDT meeting. And then obviously there's the business side of things, but I'm very big on where's my time and value worth. So I do have I do have a virtual admin person who does all my billing and reconciling, which is really good.
Are they doing many hours for you? What does that look like?
So this was a whole new space for me that I didn't know much about. And again, my personality is with the mental health thing, I like clarification. I like to ask questions. So I did talk to the OTA person who ran that program, and to get a bit more background and a bit more understanding. It did feel less daunting. And so I guess I just looked on some Facebook groups and I found some recommendations and went from there. Yeah.
And how many hours is she working for you?
1 to 2 a week.
Perfect. And ideal, working well. That sounds like it'd be a lovely additional help to get through the things that you need to do.
Yeah, definitely. And I have a friend who, at the same time as all this was happening, was like, I want to try private practice. And I did have excess referrals. So I gave it a go as well. And again, it was just one of those things. I wasn't thinking about it, but it came into my lap. So I said yes. I'm not saying yes to as many things now, though, but I said yes to the room. I said yes to the contractor, because that all took time. I guess that being the start of the year, I'm setting up all the service agreements. There's some questions about billing clients that might not have ever been involved, asked about why is this non-direct time there.
It's a lot. There's a lot of holding space for all the extra parts of the service delivery now, where it's not maybe when we had space what private would look like. It was like, let's just get in and get going, where now there's a lot of time allocated to helping you to manage your funding and all of those bits and pieces as well, which just extrapolates when you bring on a contractor, right? You can manage it for your clients, but then it's like, oh, I'm not even working with you, and now I'm involved in this piece as well.
And I think, I'm just giving myself some grace to sort of get used to that. Do I work out of hours? Yes, at the moment, but I hope eventually I'll get a bit of a rhythm when everyone's diaries are more set.
Could some of that be pushed over to your VA?
Yes, some of it could. And I think the thing with me is I had a bit of space and time in January because I wasn't seeing clients, where I wanted to get to figure out a little bit. So just in case she was away, I wanted to know how to use Alyce. I was already using Alyce and I did know it. So I think now that I understand the process, I might hand off some of that follow-up with the service agreements and things like that.
Are you doing your service agreements through Alyce now?
Yeah. Just because they can sign.
Okay.
That was
easier.
the whole thing. It was like getting the paper signed. And then if I had the documents, I was like, I've got to scan them.
So with your contractor, have they got many clients? What's your referrals looking like? Have you got enough work coming in to hold both of you? What does that look like?
Well, the thing is, at the moment, my caseload can't get bigger apart from maybe taking on some Medicare. And yet she's only going to work 2 days, and it all kind of came all at once at the end of last year. I think everyone was had just been approved for funding or were on the lookout. So I got quite a few referrals
Right.
So yeah,
Mm.
they're trickling in. They're less so now. I feel like January was quiet and they're starting to sort of come back in a
Yeah,
little
great.
bit.
Tell me a bit about, you keep on saying I can fit in some Medicare clients. Tell me a bit about that. What are you headspacing when it's a Medicare client? Are you going, I get them for 5 sessions? Are you having them pay out of pocket? What does that all sort of look like?
Yeah. So I guess I was lucky. I kind of was a bit more familiar with that system
Mm,
because my son had actually accessed that system.
cool.
Because it's not everybody knows about it and it's got such a strange name. So yeah, generally the 5 sessions, one of those is a parent session and sometimes an observation at
Mhm.
school, preschool,
Yep.
wherever. So then you've got 3 sessions to work on the goals, I suppose. And sometimes that, time better spent possibly doing a bit of parent work as
Yep.
well. But often the parents want you to work with their children, which is
Mm,
totally fine. And they do engage in the session and they do,
yep.
it's really nice because it's given that space and time where there's no other demands on them. Yeah. And so there's just like, for me, it's a bit harder in those sessions. I try to cram more in, but I just have to be a bit mindful of overloading
Yep.
and even just
Absolutely.
stating, I know we've only got 3 sessions together.
Mm,
I'm going to give you lots of things. You
yeah.
don't need to understand them all right
Yeah.
now, or we'll just kind of like pick what's really sticking with you.
When they're coming to you, do they already have the Medicare referral, or are you sending them to get that?
Bit of both.
So I guess something to have a bit of a think about. Sometimes it's more helpful to think about these clients as private clients who can access Medicare rebated sessions. So then you're not already starting on we've only got 5 sessions, we've only got 4
Yeah.
sessions. So instead, they're
Yeah.
coming to you for a course of private services.
Yeah.
So if you started at that initial caregiver session, typically, because the child's not present, if you're doing a one-on-one
Yeah.
sesh, is an
Yeah.
out-of-pocket cost anyway. So
Yeah.
you're already starting like in that nice way of, oh, this is the cost, but how lucky that you can get a few sessions rebated by the government. And if you
Yeah.
sell it in that way, it's less of we've only got these sessions and we've got to cram everything in, because you're in an area where people will pay for private services. There's absolutely a portion that definitely do not have the money to do that. But you do have, and the 2 service areas that you're looking at, there are people with money who will pay for those services. So we do need to not come from that deficit space to start with, or like, that's not the right word, not come
Does
from
that
that.
so just be limited by that model? No, that
Yeah.
is
Yeah.
mind blowing. That is
Yeah.
very good advice.
Yeah,
Thank
yeah.
you.
Like it's such a game changer. So we would always say when we would get a private inquiry that we'd probably, the minimum amount of sessions we'd typically do is probably 10 sessions. If we think about the co-op model, your coaching models, 10 sessions or 6 months is a typical course of that intervention. You know that from your public work, like rarely would the sessions be less than 5 sessions. Might be a 6 block, might have been a
No,
10 block.
no, in one of
Yeah.
mine, it was only 3 and that was pushing it.
Yeah.
And I tried to increase, like I
Yeah.
tried to sneak things in.
Mhm. So remember now, you get to pick your intervention. So you know what didn't work. You know 3 is too minimal. You know
No, it's
5
not.
really isn't super ideal. What would your course of regular sort of approach be? For me, I'm quite happy with a 10. Now I'd probably be a lot more effective with a 5, but early on I would have been much better with a 10. And just saying a typical course of therapy is 10, and you can access these rebates for 5 of them. People pay to see private psychologists all the
Yeah.
time. People
Yeah.
pay to see a hand therapist, a physio. Like, when we are not valuing what we're offering from that private perspective, which is the whole reason why you went private, to be able to do the amazing therapy that you wanted to be able to do, then they won't pay for it. But when we come from, yes, of course, yes, I'll just see you next week, there's no one that's putting that deficit mindset there, or that we're thinking abundance mindset. Like, if I say this is worthwhile and
Yeah.
I would
Yeah.
suggest this is what you need, they'll pay for it.
Yeah.
Obviously, clinical reasoning, value,
Oh, yeah.
ethical,
Yeah.
all of the
Yes,
things.
yes,
Like,
yes.
we're not just doing it just for funsies, but
No.
we're not going and shooting ourselves in the foot and being like, oh, I can only do 5 and I absolutely hate this model. So
Yeah.
that thinking about that means we're not having that short-term clients on your caseload. They might just be privately funded or
Yeah.
Medicare funded. But yeah, it does help to think about that, because then when we think about thriving kids, we're much better set up to potentially pick up these private clients that will be pushing back into the private world. And so from the starting point, you just don't let that, because we used to have them come and they're like, we've got the 5 EPC, great. But we start like this is what a course of therapy typically looks like. Like, if you think about, if we were going, nowhere else do we go hey, I'll go see the dentist and I'll tell them how often I'll come. Like
Yeah.
when we go
Yeah.
see a health professional, we do expect the health professional will guide what the clinical
Yeah.
treatment plan will be.
Yeah.
Sometimes then we have to tweak that within what is reasonable and what they can afford, but we don't want to come from that less is more to start with.
Yeah.
So have you heard me talk about that contracting phase in therapy? So it sounds like you're doing really beautifully with it within the scope that you've got. But the contracting phase is sort of when we've done our assessment, we've gathered the information. The contracting phase is that step where we take a step and we go, let me tell you how I can support you and your family. Let me
Yeah.
put my cards on the table. So I know you've got these rebated sessions, but I'd really prefer us to do this type of thing. And here's what I was thinking that would look like, blah, blah, blah. Oftentimes we skip that step and we do it into the things that we're really comfy with.
I love this step, but I think I was limiting myself to the time frame. Coming from the government was something that honestly, that seems so obvious to me now, but I'm like,
this is super common. Like this is a really common thing. I was saying in the hub the other day, oh, this is just how I was trained, like how to teach people to access private services because I was always private. So I just had to be able to tell you all the different ways you could pay to see me because you always had to pay to see me. Thinking through that helps you set all of that up so much easier. Start getting more of those clients coming into the clinic, or if we are going to push for your clinic's options, like just being so much clearer with all of that and allow you to do the great therapy that you want to do.
Yeah, and I haven't really talked to that piece. And I guess like it's a forever learning space. Like you never know everything and it's not just in OT, it's in life. But I suppose I am sort of my jam, especially coming from that CAMS role and working within the school system, because it was a lot of the kids that didn't have diagnosis. So we're thinking trauma backgrounds, we're thinking developmental delays, we're thinking more vulnerable. So I guess I'm really in that space of creating safety within the nervous system and very neurodiverse affirming practice as well, which wasn't even a term that I had heard of when I had. And I think play therapy never sat well with me. Social skills never sat well with me. So I tended to luckily skirt around those edges. And what I did do was like, I was the first person, not that I knew this, it was just not that I'm amazing or anything like that. I just happened to be interested in stuff. Like I was the first one to introduce interoception into where I worked. I was doing those neuro-affirming PDs earlier on. And I was like, oh, I don't know about this zones or alert. I never used the full program. I only used pieces of it. But I guess I hadn't quite figured out what I was doing. And I guess maybe I was coming from my own experience without realizing it. Why do we need to change those things? Like, why are they a problem?
Absolutely. And what feasibly can we get there? I think sometimes as well, when you come from a service where you're not seeing kids for a long time and you're trying to do top-down programs like that and going, this is going nowhere. We're not seeing change here. This is something that might take years and years to work on. To then going, what can I feasibly target? Like having that experience in your first role as well. Like what's actually something I can help you with? So you've had that great experience as well. And now it's figuring out how to present that within the service that you're in. Because the other challenge when you do get those private clients coming through, unless they're coming to you for you and the way that you work, they're not going to be as inclined for parent coaching sessions. They're going to want you to do that work with the kiddie, which both you and I know the majority of our work in those first 5 sessions is done with the parent. Like that's where all the change is going to happen. So in saying that, maybe it's thinking about the messaging we're putting out there. So the other model, I don't know if you've come across my framework of caregiver capacity. So it's this scale.
Briefly.
Cool. So I'll send that over to you and it's available. People can download it on the website.
I think I've downloaded it and then it's just like one of those things where it's like, I need to get to it.
But it's probably one that applies really nicely, really straightforward into the way that you're working already. So you know how with our lower capacity families, you know how you were just saying before, we've only got 3 sessions. We're going to give you so much. But often that capacity of that family can't take all of that on, regardless of how well we give it to them.
And I think that's something that I'm in a struggle with myself better now, but I think this was another thing I would tell my young me, whether I would listen or not, is that it's okay to just, again, it's just about being still. And like, I know there's different models and I'm not fully across everything around like how much of actual therapy is based on the relationship versus the actual modality that you're using. And sometimes just that presence and that holding that space for that client is so therapeutic.
Absolutely.
And that comes up a lot for me with my PDAs. They've taught me so much. And actually now people used to be this big scary thing that people like, no, it's not a real thing, not a real thing. It's definitely a thing. And like, I guess from my experience, but now some of my sessions with my PDAs are the funnest ones I have.
One of the things that I've found when people get to that more experienced space, so I was running Art of Peds a couple of weeks ago and they were saying, I just don't know the answers. I'm like, but I don't know the answer. Like that's actually where we end up you go through this phase where you're like, oh my gosh, I have the answers to everything. And then you work in the real world and you go, I never know an exact answer to anything because there's so many things that this could be. Like, rarely is it a discrete thing. This is happening for this reason, or it's definitely this. And I do a lot of, I wonder, it could be, I wonder if it's this. So many therapists feel like they need to know exactly what's what, but actually we don't. And when you come to that more experienced end, we spend a lot of time going, I'm wondering, it could be maybe 20 options. I've got 20 different clinical pathways in my head that we could go down. Let me talk you through what that looks like. What does that mean for you? Like, thinking through that piece. And I think that's what you're sort of saying in terms of holding space and slowing down. It's also being okay that you don't have a direct answer, because there actually isn't a right answer right now.
Exactly. And like, my style has always been so eclectic. And I think it's because I am so client centered. I always went back to every job interview I had. I would talk about the evidence-based practice model, like with the circles. Now they've added 4, but it was 3 at the time, where it's like, okay, what is the evidence, the research? And I'm saying that in inverted commas. And then what are the client's needs? And then what's your clinical experience? It all has to, and now it's the practice context. But what does that mean for you? And that just enabled me to feel more confident in backing myself.
For those listening at home, I've put a resource that's available to download. It's the conversation planning tool, so clinical conversation planning tool. And it's a nice resource. It's one I'm going to send over to you to have a look at as well. But it's one that takes you through all your thought considerations. So it's like, what's the problem or the goal that someone's bringing to you or that they're worried about? Now, what do we know? Tell me about their diagnosis, their individual differences, other things that are going on. Then we think about the family context, situation, scenario, all of those things. What about school? What is that looking like? Then we work our way down. Who else is involved? Where are they at? What are they working on? So, if we're thinking about evidence-based practice, we need to think through all of these things before we come to the conclusion as to what am I going to do? Where am I going to go? Or what's the conversation that we need to have here? So it can be tricky to impart that or to verbalize why I'm thinking what I'm thinking, or what I've observed here and why I'm making these steps here, because that step sort of needs to happen before we are contracting. So I think when we do work beautifully and eclectically like we do, we can still put words around that. Like, I'm choosing a bit of this model over here and I'm picking this over here and I'm taking this approach for this reason and letting you know this is what it will look like.
For some families, they're just so happy. And for other families, they want to know everything. It's like the hard line of, you don't want to give too much information to overwhelm them. And then I think that comes with experience and relationship. And I think in terms of like clients trusting you and being open in the communication with you, I think that is like a cornerstone.
Something like you said, it can be something that you can learn, but often it just comes with experience, being able to hold space, hear hard things, and still show up in a nice and friendly and kind way. But I've been talking about this, and you've said this a few times, so I think this language would be nice for you to take into practice, thinking about intentionality in our practice. So when we would have, over the last number of years, done a lot of modeling, for example. So I would say things like, I was modeling through that session, but I never had a conversation with the parent that I was modeling something that they needed to be watching and that I wanted them to have a takeaway. So now if we think about intentionality, you're thinking, in this session, I want to model this thing. So I need to actually have a chat with mum, let her know I'm modeling this thing and how I want her to take that home and practice that. So when we be more intentional with that and verbalize that intentionality, it puts so much more clarity around what you're doing and why. And I think that aligns with where you're sitting at so beautifully in your intentional world of everything else that you're doing. But it really allows us to demonstrate our knowledge, be clear about what we're trying to get to, but put language around what I'm doing and why I'm doing it here, which then helps with those private clients to be like, and here's what I want to do moving forward.
I think so. And I think the other thing that I've picked up with families is like, and it does put them on the spot a little bit, but I do kind of say, like, with the kids, I do WWW, what went well, WWL, what we learned, because I did some education-based training from a trauma school called the Berry Street model, and they had some great things like that. I ask the parents, I say, key takeaway, and just get them to list like 1 or 2. And again, that's around that intentionality. And I think just bringing my awareness to during the session as well, in that moment, will be really good as well. Do it sometimes, but not all the time. And then it's like, there's so many things that are going on all at the same time.
But I think that that's okay, right? Because when I used to try and do that, right? Like, Jewel run the session while bringing the parent on, like, alongside me, I'm giving half my attention attention here in half. Like that is not therapeutically overly effective. So what I would intentionally do now would be, okay, this is a session where you just get to hang and watch. This session, I want you to watch specifically this, and then we'll have a chat about that at the end.
Yeah.
So you're not necessarily breaking down during the session exactly what you're doing and why. So you can fully be involved and immersed and engaged, but you've given them clarity around what they're taking out of it. Yeah, which I think is so powerful, because prior to this, I used to just be like, bleh, 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 kid, bleh, 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 kid. And so they're both getting half of my attention. It's not an effective session whatsoever. I'm feeling frazzled as hell because I'm sort of running 2 concurrent sessions at the same time.
It's hard with the 2. I much prefer having that dedicated time. So like for one of my clients, and this is the thing with the NDIS and the flexibility that you have, which is really nice. What works for that family is it's just as simple as a 10-minute phone call at a time that the kids aren't present. I think that's the other thing. And I guess hopefully this will bode well for me. Like in all of my careers, like all of my jobs, even in government, I've just asked questions, suggested, but not just asked the questions, but then suggested ideas. So actually in some of the services I've worked in, I got to work with clients for a whole term, sometimes 2 terms, because I utilized our allied health assistants, which meant I didn't always have to be there. This kid's getting a good length of therapy, it hopefully would have some impact. And so I think sometimes I downplay or don't acknowledge that I do have some skills in the bag. Hopefully that will help me in a circle roundabout way with thriving kids.
I actually think that you're incredibly well placed for whatever comes with the thriving kids. So you are absolutely downplaying your experience. The experience that you've come from in all of those different roles puts you in a really good position to go wherever this ends up. I could jump into one of these roles and know what that would look like. I know how to work in a time limited service. It's not my preference, but I know how to do it, and I know how to do it well in a way that aligns with my values. If I choose not to do that and I keep the private practice going, I know what my values are that align in that space. The bit that we need to tweak a little smidge more is how do I make that viable and profitable and sustainable, that piece. But you're pretty much there, right? Like there's a couple of little tweaks, like when you just said, with NDIS, I can do it. You can do that in the private space. We just build it into the way that you bill for your time. Like it doesn't mean it can't happen. It's just, again, being intentional with what do I want this service model to look like? I don't need to do it the same way as everybody else does. That's okay, because you're actually an incredibly skilled therapist. You've got lots of beautiful, great skills. We just have to think about how does that show up into this private space? Because you actually did intentionally come out into private to offer the best type of therapy that you could.
I love it. And it's so fun and it's so creative. And I have that relationship. It's given me the joy back again. And like I said, work isn't everything for me, but it is one piece that if you don't have at least a good team around you, even if the work isn't, what exactly you think you want. So
make it happen.
Watch this space and see what happens. I think I'm in the very early baby phases. Like I don't even know how much I'll earn. So I think again, just giving myself a year out, then hopefully it picks up and I get to be more intentional. It's just a shame that in that year there's going to be a big system change at the same time.
It is a shame, but you didn't come in to do this to make a heap of money. You're not replacing it. You're in a good space to be able to ride this in whichever way it goes. I've got an ebook that I wrote last year for, I think it was Reclaiming Success. I'll send that to you. In this book, it talks about redefining success in allied health practice. One of the things that sometimes we get caught up in is, what did we go into this for? You've come into this really intentionally. You are doing this. What did I come into this for? And make it be really intentional. Am I in it to make a salary like I was in those other roles? Am I in it for the flexibility of being able to do these other trainings and amazing things that you're doing and then still keep my clinical side going? What is it? Because when you look at this, it's been pretty successful, right? Like you're doing the work you want to do in the hours that you want to work, and it's making you some money, and all of those things are going really well. So knowing what you want out of it will help you to make those next steps too.
That sounds really good. I think I backed myself enough that this will unfold. It won't just unfold without me doing anything, but the amount of pressure or effort I'm not going to put that on myself. I just know that it will come with consistency and attention.
Amazing. And that's probably a really nice space for us to wrap up. So we do normally do a bit of a note to self, but I feel like you smattered your notes to self all throughout the pod. Would you like to do another one to yourself? You can have a think whether it's to yourself at starting the private practice space or going right back to early baby therapist.
Well, starting the private practice space, because I do wonder, there's probably a lot of people who have ventured out into that area. I paid for help And I think I probably could have done this earlier, and there's pros and cons to both. So I guess it's knowing you don't need to know everything, which I did know, but then, when you go to take that step, it feels really big, especially with like EHG and that executive function, difficulties and challenges that come with that. The planning is overwhelming because there's so many things to do. But for me, it was at the right pace and the right speed.
Sounds like you did a great job and you're setting up a beautiful values-based practice.
Hopefully we're here to stay.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
The OT Coaching Confidential podcast exists to support occupational therapists to think clearly, feel less alone, and take meaningful steps in their work. If this conversation resonated for you, take a moment to notice what stood out. Have a think about the takeaways from this session and what you might be able to apply in your own personal or professional practice. If you'd like to keep the conversation going, head on over to the otcoach.au. Inside here, you'll find resources, workshops, trainings, lots of different things, including some new freebies that we've just set up. I've also got the OT Coach Academy, where we have the Pediatric Hub, as well as a brand new Business Owners Hub, and this will be for group practice owners to come together and share and learn. Please note that the information shared in this podcast is general in nature and is not intended to replace individualised advice. Thank you for listening, and I'll see you in the next episode.